Story 1. The Obsessed Stalker. By the time Valentine's Day approached, we had been going out for a while. I never cared much for the holiday, but having someone to share it with made it less unbearable. Nikki was smart, kind, and had this way of making even silence feel comfortable. But there was something in her past, something she hadn't told me yet. As the holiday neared, she finally opened up about something that had been bothering her for years. It was about him, a man named Ben. Nikki hesitated before speaking, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "There's something I haven't told you about someone from my past." Her voice was calm, but there was something off about the way she said it, like she had been holding it in for too long. His name was Ben. He was a few years older than her, someone she met in college. It started as nothing, just a guy she had been grouped with for a class project. But then she began noticing him everywhere. At first, she brushed it off. Some people had the same class schedules, shared the same spaces on campus. But then he started showing up in places he had no reason to be. She'd leave the library late at night and see him standing outside. She'd be at the gym, and he'd already be there staring. She even caught him following her home once. Then came the messages. Nothing outright threatening, but uncomfortable. Asking where she was, who she was with, why she wasn't responding faster. She ignored them, blocked his number, moved on, until he found her address. That was when the real fear started. She never reported it to the police, maybe out of fear, maybe because she hoped ignoring him would make him stop. And for a while, he did. But then came Valentine's Day, and suddenly, he was back. The messages started again. At first, it was just a few texts. "Hey, Nikki. Long time. No talk. You look beautiful in red. You always did. Are you spending Valentine's Day alone?" She didn't reply. She wanted to believe that if she ignored him, he would go away. But then something changed. One evening, as she was coming home, she froze at her doorstep. Sitting there, in a perfectly wrapped heart-shaped box, was a box of chocolates. Her stomach dropped. She didn't have to guess who left it. Her phone buzzed. A message. "I hope you liked the gift I left for you." She felt sick. This wasn't just a text anymore. He had been here, standing on her doorstep, close enough to leave something behind. That was when she knew. Ignoring him wasn't enough anymore. She grabbed her phone with trembling fingers and started typing. A long, final message, telling him to stop, telling him to get help, telling him that she was with someone now. She hit send, and then she waited. For a moment, it was silent. Then another message came through. "He's not right for you." For the next few days, there were no messages, no gifts, no signs of him. Nikki started to feel like maybe, just maybe, he had finally given up. But then, late one evening, her phone lit up. A new message from an unknown number. "Hey, is the guy you're seeing named your name?" Her blood ran cold. It wasn't just another message. He knew who I was. She took a screenshot and sent it to me immediately. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Up until now, I had only heard about Ben through Nikki's stories. He had been nothing more than an unsettling presence in her past. But now, he was texting her about me, using my name. That's when I realized he was watching us. Somewhere, out there in the dark, he was watching. Valentine's Day arrived, and Nikki and I decided to go out for dinner. We picked a restaurant by the water, one of those places that had outdoor seating with a perfect view of the city lights reflecting on the waves. The night air was crisp but pleasant, and for the first time in weeks, things felt normal. For a while, we just talked about everything except him. But then Nikki's expression suddenly changed. Her gaze flickered past me toward the parking lot. I turned to look. A man sat alone near the edge of the lot, positioned just outside the glow of the streetlights. He wore a hooded jacket, the shadow from the hood obscuring most of his face. Something about the way he sat, still, rigid, too aware of us, made my stomach churn. Nikki let out a nervous laugh. "What if that's him?" she whispered, trying to brush it off. We both chuckled weakly, but the longer we stared, the more unsettling it became. Then, he moved, not toward us, not away. He just tilted his head, a slow, unnatural movement, like he had just realized we were looking at him. Then, without warning, he stood up and walked away, not toward the restaurant, not toward a car, just into the darkness. Nikki and I sat in uneasy silence. We didn't laugh anymore. After dinner, we tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. "It was probably just some random guy," Nikki said, forcing a smile. I nodded, though deep down, I wasn't convinced. We decided to head back to my place. Since her parents were home, it made more sense to spend the rest of the evening somewhere quiet, alone. For a while, it was normal. Just us, unwinding, relaxing. Then, a noise from outside. It wasn't loud, just a faint rustling, like someone shifting in the darkness. I glanced at Nikki. She had heard it too. "It's probably an animal," I said, getting up. She hesitated. "Maybe don't..." But I was already moving. The sliding door creaked as I stepped onto the back patio. The night air was still, unnaturally so. I scanned the garden. Nothing. Then, my foot hit something. Glass. A shattered garden lantern lay scattered on the ground, broken into sharp pieces. Something had knocked it over. I swallowed hard, looking toward the trees lining the edge of the yard. The shadows were deep, stretching far beyond what my eyes could pierce. That's when I saw it. A figure, tall, still, hidden among the trees, watching. I took a step forward, my breath catching. The figure remained motionless, as if waiting for something. Then it moved. The figure moved. Not quickly, not aggressively. Just a slow shift, like it knew I had seen it. I felt my heartbeat hammering in my chest. The garden was eerily silent, as if even the air itself had frozen in fear. I took another step forward, squinting into the darkness. The figure was tall, too tall. It stood partially hidden among the trees, its shape distorted by the shadows, but I could tell it was watching me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. No response, just silence. Then, without warning, the figure rushed forward, a blur of movement, twigs snapping, leaves scattering as something lunged from the trees. My body reacted before my mind did. I turned and ran. I ran. The grass crunched beneath my feet as I sprinted toward the house, heart pounding, lungs burning. Behind me, the sound of footsteps, fast, heavy, gaining. I reached the patio, fumbling for the door handle. But before I could pull it open, something slammed into me. I stumbled forward, barely catching myself before I hit the ground. A sharp pain exploded across my shoulder. Then a hand grabbed my wrist. I whipped around, struggling against the grip. The figure was right there. Close. Too close. I couldn't see its face. Just a dark silhouette, tall and broad, breathing heavily. I fought back, twisting, kicking, pushing. A scuffle, a blur of movement. Both of us crashed to the ground. Then from inside the house, "I'm calling the police!" Nikki's voice. The figure froze, a second of hesitation. Then it released me and ran. I lay there gasping as the sound of heavy footsteps disappeared into the night. I staggered to my feet, my entire body trembling. My shoulder ached from where I had hit the ground, and my breathing was ragged. The backyard was empty now. The figure had disappeared into the darkness beyond the trees. Nikki ran to me, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "They're on their way," she gasped. I barely nodded, still scanning the shadows, waiting, expecting him to return. Minutes passed. Then, red and blue lights flashed across the yard. A police car pulled up, 2 officers stepping out, flashlights cutting through the darkness. One officer approached me while the other moved toward the trees. "He ran that way," I managed to say, pointing. The officer nodded, speaking into his radio. A few tense moments later, rustling. The other officer emerged from the woods, gripping someone's arm. A man, tall, hooded, breathing heavily, and then Nikki gasped. "Oh my God, it's him!" I looked at the man's face for the first time. Ben. The police shoved him toward the car, handcuffing him as he sneered. "You think this changes anything?" he muttered, eyes locked on Nikki. A chill ran down my spine. The officer pushed him into the back seat. "This is over," I said, more to myself than to him. Ben just smiled. Story 2. The Photographer's Trap. A nice dinner, laughter, and a long walk through the city. The streets were still buzzing with couples, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. We were about to head home when we noticed him. A man standing near the entrance of a small alleyway. Tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes, holding a camera. He was staring at us, not just casually looking, staring. As we walked past, he took a step forward. "Excuse me," he called, his voice smooth but slightly off. We stopped. "Would you like a couple's photo shoot? No charge. I just need more work for my portfolio." Something about his smile felt wrong. My girlfriend hesitated, her grip on my arm tightening. "That's okay, we're good," I said. But he just stood there, smiling, like he was waiting for something. Then he raised the camera and took a picture. Without our permission, the flash from the camera was blinding for a second. I blinked, adjusting my vision, my heart pounding. "What the hell, man?" I snapped. The photographer just smiled. "Sorry, you two looked perfect in the light. Couldn't resist." I clenched my jaw, stepping slightly in front of my girlfriend. "Delete it." He tilted his head, still smiling, but something in his eyes was off. "Come on," he said, his voice smooth. "You sure you don't want just a few pictures? No cost. I'll even send them to you tonight. You both look so photogenic." My girlfriend shook her head. "We're leaving," I said. I took her hand and turned away, moving quickly. The man didn't follow, but I felt him watching. A chill ran down my spine. We walked for a while, but the feeling didn't fade. Then my girlfriend stopped suddenly. Her face was pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. She lifted her phone, and my stomach dropped. There was a new message, from an unknown number. It was a picture of us. Taken from behind, someone had been following us. We stood frozen on the sidewalk, the glow from the streetlights casting long shadows. The message on her phone burned into my mind. A picture, taken from behind. Someone was right behind us. I turned sharply, scanning the street. Nothing. The air was thick with silence, but I could feel it. Something was wrong. "We need to leave." "Now," I whispered, taking her hand. We moved quickly, heading toward the nearest crowded area. But every few steps, I glanced over my shoulder, and then I saw him, the photographer. He was across the street, standing completely still. No phone in his hands, no camera, just watching. Then he moved. Not toward us, not away, but fast. Cutting through the crowd, coming straight at us. My girlfriend let out a sharp gasp. We ran, but before we could reach the corner, a hand grabbed my shoulder, hard. I barely had time to react before I was yanked backward, my body slamming against the cold brick wall of a nearby building. Pain shot through my ribs. The photographer was right there, his face inches from mine, and that smile, that awful, twisted smile. "You looked perfect in the light," he whispered. We escaped. I don't remember how. It was a blur. One moment, the photographer had me pinned against the wall, whispering that eerie line, "You looked perfect in the light." The next, a bystander's voice cut through the air. "Hey, what's going on?" The photographer vanished into the night, just like that. We ran. We didn't stop until we were home, behind locked doors, our breaths ragged, our bodies shaking. For hours, neither of us spoke much. We double-checked the locks, closed the blinds, left the lights on. "It's over," my girlfriend finally whispered. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. Later that night, after we had finally calmed down, we went to bed. I barely slept. Then, at 3 a.m., I woke up. Something had stirred me, a sound, the doorknob. It was rattling. Someone was outside our apartment. Slowly, I sat up, heart pounding. The rattling stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then a single, slow knock. I turned to my girlfriend. She was still asleep. I swallowed hard, sliding out of bed. I moved to the front door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. I hesitated, then checked the peephole. Nothing. Just the dimly lit hallway, empty and still. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Somewhere, someone was there, waiting. I stared through the peephole, my breath slow and controlled. The hallway was empty, no sound, no movement, but something felt wrong. I turned the lock as quietly as possible and cracked the door open just an inch. A wave of cold air rushed in. I peered out. Still, nothing. The dim overhead lights flickered faintly. The silence was unnatural, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Then, I noticed something. A single Polaroid, lying on the floor, right in front of our door. My chest tightened as I bent down and picked it up. The image was blurry, grainy, but the subject was unmistakable. It was a photo of us, taken from outside our window. I looked up sharply, my heart pounding. Down the hallway, the elevator doors slid shut. Someone had been here, and they had just left. My hands trembled as I picked up the Polaroid. The image was grainy, distorted, but the message was clear. It was us, taken from outside our window. Someone had been watching. Someone had been there. The elevator at the end of the hall let out a soft ding. I turned sharply, but it was too late. The doors slid shut. Whoever had been here was gone. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. My girlfriend stirred from the couch, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "What are you doing?" she asked. I hesitated, then slowly handed her the photo. She stared at it. Then her expression changed. Her face went pale, her breath hitched. She wasn't looking at us in the picture. She was looking at something else. "Oh my God," she whispered. I snatched the photo back, staring at it again. Then I saw it. In the reflection of the window, a figure, standing inside the apartment, right behind us. My breath hitched. The reflection in the Polaroid wasn't just showing us. It was showing something else. Someone else. A figure stood in the background, tall, unmoving, inside our apartment. My grip on the photo tightened. This isn't real," I whispered, but my girlfriend's face told me otherwise. The room suddenly felt colder. I turned my head slowly. The hallway behind me stretched into darkness. My eyes scanned every corner, every shadow. I saw nothing, but I felt it. Something was still here, watching, waiting. The air in the room seemed to shift. A whisper, so faint, so close, brushed against my ear. "You finally see me." The lights flickered. The shadows in the hallway moved, and then the door to our bedroom creaked open. The bedroom door stood open. Beyond it, nothing but darkness. My chest tightened. My girlfriend clutched my arm, her breath quick and shallow. "It's still here," she whispered. I didn't answer. I took one step forward. Then, movement. A shadow, barely visible, shifting in the darkness of the room, watching. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get out. Then, a single, slow knock at the front door. The air turned ice cold. We both turned toward the sound. The peephole was empty, but we knew. Somewhere, in the unseen depths of our home, it was still here, waiting, and it wasn't done with us yet. It was supposed to be a relaxing evening. Valentine's Day had been simple, a quiet dinner at home, a couple of movies, and a glass of wine. No crowds, no noise, just peace. By midnight, my girlfriend had already fallen asleep on the couch. The soft hum of the TV played in the background, casting flickering light across the room. I sat there, staring at my phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. Then, a sound. Software almost unnoticeable. Scratching, coming from the front door. My eyes lifted from the screen. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. Then, another scratch. Slow, deliberate. The kind of sound that wasn't made by the wind. The kind of sound that meant someone was there. I didn't move. I just listened. The scratching at the front door was slow, deliberate. Not the random scraping of a tree branch or the shuffle of the wind. It was purposeful. Someone was out there. I glanced at my girlfriend. She was still asleep, curled under a blanket. I swallowed hard and stood up. Every step toward the door felt heavier. The closer I got, the clearer the sound became. A faint, dragging scrape, like nails against wood. I reached the peephole and hesitated. Something inside me screamed not to look. But I did. And there was nothing there, just an empty, dimly lit hallway. But the scratching, it didn't stop. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was silence. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding against my ribs. Then, the door handle moved, a slow, deliberate turn. I stumbled backward. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't my imagination. Someone was trying to get in. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, but before I could dial, the handle stopped moving. A pause. Then from the other side of the door came a sound that sent ice through my veins. A whisper. Too soft to understand, but too close. It was right outside. I stood frozen. The door handle had stopped turning. But the silence was worse. Something was still there, waiting. Then, a knock. Software rhythmic. 3 slow taps. Knock, knock, knock. A chill ran down my spine. The whispering from before was gone. Whoever, or whatever, had been there was now announcing itself. I took a step back. Another knock, louder this time. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy, suffocating. And then, a voice, muffled, distorted. Let me in. The knocking stopped, but I could feel it. Something was still there, waiting, watching. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I took a slow step forward. My fingers trembled as I reached for the peephole. Don't look, don't look, don't look. But I did, and something was looking back, an eye. Wide, unblinking, too close. Far too close. A smile. Stretched too wide like it wasn't meant to be on a human face. I stumbled back. The doorknob rattled again. A whisper slithered through the wood. I see you. The knocking stopped, but I could feel it. Something was still there, waiting, watching. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I took a slow step forward. My fingers trembled as I reached for the peephole. Don't look, don't look, don't look. But I did, and something was looking back, an eye. Wide, unblinking, too close. Far too close. A smile. Stretched too wide like it wasn't meant to be on a human face. I stumbled back. The doorknob rattled again. A whisper slithered through the wood. I see you.